Okay.
It's being live streamed.
Good morning. Welcome. Okay. Yeah, better?
Yes, better.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, LinkedIn. Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning. Welcome.
Welcome to Thursdays with Culture Talk.
Better. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to turn the little volume off on my phone. Okay.
All right, start over.
Take two. It's been a few weeks since I've been with you here live with Cynthia, my partner, and I'm excited to be back on Thursdays with Culture Talk.
Welcome back.
I had a lovely trip to Italy this spring, and thanks, Cynthia, for hosting you and leading some really fantastic conversations. Today, we are looking forward to another one. Today, we're going to talk about culture being a common thread and something that you can enter this door, this conversation, this really important foundational conversation from many different places, that there are many ways that culture is an integrated topic and it touches so many people in an organization and on so many levels. And so today's conversation is really going to maybe shine a light on something that you're doing to participate, enhance, support, and grow the culture at your organization, maybe in ways that you hadn't thought about before. Let me tell you a little bit of background on Culture Talk and on Cynthia and I, and the door that we walked through to be leading this conversation and to get to a place where we're really looking to grow a community around culture. Back in 2001, right, Cyn? It was 2001?
Yeah, 2001.
Yeah, we started a brand development company, which was Allegory Studios. And early in that journey, we discovered the power of archetype to enhance the conversations that we were having around brand. And we got real clear that the most important driver for a brand, for an organization to get authentic about the way it talked about itself, was to understand what was happening in the culture. And so we began to measure the culture. And we measured the culture using archetype. And, Cynthia, maybe you can reflect on the impact that had and the way that people received the results and the brand once it was, created through that foundation of culture.
Yeah, I love telling this story because, we originally were doing that work because it made our jobs easier. We needed a way. There was a selfish component to it. We needed a way to really get inside the heads of our clients and to find a way to reflect that. And so going in and measuring the culture gave us a shortcut and a really authentic way to get in. And so it started out as sort of us doing a better job. And then over time, clients would experience the kind of storytelling that really felt authentic and really reflected how they felt, particularly founders and presidents and leadership teams where they had trouble articulating what it is that makes them tick. And in being able to measure archetype and help them express that, it was so powerful that they would say, oh, finally somebody gets me, right? Like, oh, I've been trying to say that. I just didn't have the words. I didn't have a way to say that. And so the impact would be both in the moment of revealing, hey, these are these ideas we have about how to tell your story through a brand. So there was that really powerful moment where they got to see themselves authentically and go, yes, that's me. But then as time went on, the impact grew. That was, I think, the real aha for you.
Absolutely, right. Because as a brand development company, we would deliver and then there'd be another client and we'd be moving on. And we could see, because we'd measured culture, all these other, potential benefits of understanding the culture, of knowing the archetype, but we were a brand company and we moved on and said sort of good luck with that. And but they would call us back. They would call us back, and we started to recognize that we were delivering more than a typical brand agency, and that through this door we'd walked in and really talking about culture, there was enormous opportunity, both for us as an agency, but for our clients. And so they started asking us to help them with mergers and acquisitions, bringing cultures together. They were looking for us to do things like help with recruiting and getting the employment brand in place. And that just really happened very organically,
leaders,
very
that's
naturally.
I really think about, like, how, you know, they were like, can you help my team get that? Can you, like, there was this, right? There was this, which was the answer to who are we, which was what culture is. Who are we? And it's a topic that you can't artificially separate, right? You can't say, if I'm talking about, you know, all right, we came in through a brand doorway and we were talking and using the word brand, but really what we had done is we had named that sticky stuff in the middle, that sticky stuff that makes us all come together and be part of something that's bigger than us, which is the culture. So something we couldn't separate it from hiring. We couldn't separate it from how we trained our team or trained our leaders. We couldn't separate it from how do we need to shift if we're going to continue being successful in the market. So I think about it like, you know, literally, like, there's all these arms and legs that are connected to culture.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me of the wheel we use now to illustrate and think about those different doors that you can walk in, because there's no right or wrong starting place around this conversation. You know, in our wheel, we look at the half of the wheel that deals with the organization, and the other half of the wheel, you know, that culture is really that integrated look at the human beings that are part of the organization. And nobody owns it alone. There's
it's kind of a relief. So if you've been up there and told you own culture and you're like, it feels so big, it is big.
Yeah. And what this system and this framework of archetype really helped us to do, that we were talking about there, is make it tangible,
right,
and give it a name. And what the work that we did at Allegory allowed companies to do is talk about it, because it's really hard to talk about something that doesn't have a name, that doesn't have, you know, some kind of framework and those handles like around it.
Yeah.
And
so
people
do talk about it and they don't have that, it's very generic, right? It's actually one of my pet peeves when you talk to somebody and you say, well, what's the culture like? And they go, we've got a great culture, but that's as far as they can go. They don't have a way, like, they don't know how to define great. So it comes across as very surface level.
right.
Right. And that's what the struggle is in talking about culture. Is it great? Is it toxic? What is it? And maybe let's talk now about how archetypes, that framework, creates those handles.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, one thing that I think archetype does and helps people to, you know, really get comfortable with is each pattern has a strength and a shadow, many strengths and many shadows, but it's a continuum. And we might find that the great culture we love so much has some bad days, and that's okay. It's okay when we can see that, because we can understand how to get it back, how to stay on the strength of the pattern, how to navigate what's actually happening from a human perspective, understanding what underlying drivers and motivators are. And that's all through understanding the fact that each pattern is going to have good days and not so good days.
And there is no perfect culture. There is no right culture. There is the culture that exists. And once we start to see it, because archetypes help us see what's at play, see the storyline, see the pattern. You know,
another thought that I have about, you know, the handles and the many ways that people in different roles are leading this conversation is individuals have patterns too. So when we look at people who are working in leadership development, who are working in recruiting or in team building, all of those things at the individual level allow us to understand, you know, the the people who are driving the culture.
Yeah.
And so being able to lead, grow, develop, and bring awareness to the people who are in the culture is another really important way that, people who are working in all different types of roles within the organization can get their hands around this.
And they are doing culture work too, because we can't artificially separate the organizational system from the people who are part of it. We like to say they're inextricably intertwined.
Yeah.
But we do hear people, for example, even in the CultureTalk network, people who have come in and trained with us who maybe came through like you and I did through the brand door.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very comfortable in the organizational system space. Like, what is the brand of the organization? And they're a little hesitant to go that, oh, I could coach or work with people or train leaders or develop teams, because they feel like experts sort of on one side of the equation. But we're seeing them do it. We're seeing people that come in maybe on one side or the other, kind of jumping over that gap, making that leap from how do I impact change, not just in an organizational, on the organizational level, but also with the individuals that are part. And that's this framework of archetype that we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about culture, it's not static, right? So it continues to change. It reacts to things that are happening in the market, perhaps. It needs to evolve oftentimes. Maybe there is a big shift in an industry, or some worldwide pandemic or something that, causes your culture to have a shock to it that needs to adjust to. Maybe there's a goal to increase, expand, all of those are change initiatives. So one of the things that I love around change is that it requires the culture to shift and to, reshape itself sometimes. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, when we look at culture change, we know that it's not the organization that changes, really, it's the people, right? It has to happen at the individual level. And so again, in order to create a culture shift or a culture change, it takes all of the people in the organization to understand what's happening, to, with intention, make those shifts, those changes, and to start with themselves.
Right. And not to come along by being dragged, but really to recognize their own opportunity for growth and change, and how can they do that shift that's going to enable the organization to shift as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. So if you are someone who is, leading a brand conversation, that's the door we walked through, then understanding culture can help you to deliver a more authentic brand. Mm. If you're somebody who is working around change initiatives, change management, culture transformation, then having a tangible way to talk about the culture and understand that the culture is going to have good days and bad days, and that doesn't make it a bad culture. Right. Then the framework of archetype is something that can really enhance your ability to quickly engage people in that conversation.
Another thing I would like to comment on culture, because people, oh, I'm not a culture expert. But the thing about using archetypes is archetype as a framework, it's a human framework. It's just human storylines. And I would like everyone to know that you are an expert on being human. You are an expert on being human. We sometimes say archetypes are human beings being human. To use your point earlier, they're not perfect. They have good days and bad days. They have strengths and they have shadows. And so you don't need to be a people scientist or be a PhD in psychology to understand the human experience. And so that's kind of how we also can, I recently got a call from someone who was given permission to really look at some culture work in her organization, given a budget even to say, hey, I want you to do something here with culture. And they went out and they interviewed different companies that had a culture platform. And then we met, and the recognition was the real difference between there are things that are calling themselves culture platforms that are like data gathering machines, like survey machines where we can get lots of data about how people feel about the organization. And it's like a box, but
an empty box.
Like an empty box, a box with numbers and data, but without a way to interpret that data. And I think what I heard is
and apply. I think that the big outcome and the things we hear a lot about is, so what? Now what?
Yeah. Or you could hire someone who was a people scientist to consult with you on what the big data box said. We have a very different platform here and a very different system because we are going to train you in the things you already understand as a human being, but you haven't had a frame. You haven't had a way to frame your understanding of those things. And so when we train people at CultureTalk, we have a certification program. We are training them in the framework of archetypes, which opens up all kinds of ahas, right? About even their own storylines, even their own patterns, even what's worked for them in their lives or where they're stuck in that strength or that shadow.
Right. And I would also add that, what we hear a lot is that archetype is sticky. So people get their arms around it, they have an initial experience with it, and they want more. So they start applying the language, they start using that as a way to communicate better. So again, many doors to walk through, and it opens many doors because now things that were maybe too hard to talk about, people are actually talking about. And the fastest way to make change is to be able to have an honest conversation. So we find that lots of honest conversations follow the first introduction to this, whether you're coming in on the human side of it, from the HR, the leadership development space, or whether you're coming in on the strategic side of it from an organizational perspective around change management, brand, or mergers, bringing cultures together. There's a lot of doors that, enter into this space around culture and can benefit from having a tangible way to talk about it.
So the answer to the question, who owns culture, is that it's a group effort. And there are lots of experts working in a particular arena that own a piece of it or have a stake in it, or, can be influencing and shaping it from where they sit. And also they can expand that influence and that ability to be part of transformation, change, and shaping of a culture by having a tool set. And that's the opportunity that we offer with CultureTalk, is to actually give people a tool set for having these really important transformative conversations. We do have a certification program coming up May 2nd. We're going to begin our next certification cohorts. We'll drop some details about that program into the comments below. But Theresa, maybe talk about who comes to those and what do we do in those?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of think goes to everything we've said today. So we have management consultants who are part of these certification trainees. We have people who are HR consultants, people who are focused on learning and development, people who are working on culture transformation, with people who are coaches, who are leading individuals, executives, teams through personal change initiatives so that they can ladder up, so that they can become the best version of themselves, and in support of their career goals and in support of their organizations. So lots of different people, those who are embedded in a larger consulting firm and those who are building a consulting practice and need a tool set to do that. So there are, I think one of the best outcomes of joining the CultureTalk network is the exposure that you get to people who are doing this work, not only across lots of different disciplines, but who are bringing it to companies and organizations across the world. So we have people who are, and I had someone in our current cohort from El Salvador who was happy that we were going to be adding a new dot in that area of the world. So I think we are up to 18 or 19 countries now. So lots of opportunity to network with people who are doing the work around the world. And that has been really a huge part of the learning experience for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you probably, if this is resonating in any way, you're probably already doing culture work, even if that's not what you call it. And so we'd invite you to reach out to Theresa or myself. We're happy to share more. We're happy to share some of the tool set, give you an experience with the work, to see, is this a fit? Is this something that would help you further your career or further your practice, and be able to deliver in a deeper way around the work of organizational culture.
Thanks for being with us. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Back in 2 weeks, by the way, with one of our culture transformation experts, Ronaldo Naves, who's with Olivia Global in Brazil, and he's going to be sharing some a case study about a major culture transformation effort that is underway, and how he's been able to bring archetypes into that work. So stay tuned for that. Have a great